Vaya, Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So I'd like to welcome all the devotees. Thank you so much for joining. I'd like to seek your good wishes and your blessings so that we can continue. We are nearly at the end of the third canto, 29th chapter. So let's get the blessings of Prabhupada and Guru Maharaj so that we can continue and complete this very important canto. We'll probably finish it tomorrow. So let's make a start. I'll skip the overview. This beautiful verse in the 13th verse of this chapter. Salokya shasti samipya sarupa katvam api utta diyamannam nagrananti vinamat sevanam jana.
Translation: A pure devotee does not accept any kind of liberation.
Salokya
Salokya
shasti
Sashti
samipya
Sampya
surupya
Sarupya or Ekatava,
ekatava.
even though they are offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead.
Very good, boy. So we'll come to this verse in a minute again. Such an important verse. This chapter is entitled Explanation of Devotional Service by Lord Kapil. And it's further questions that are asked by Devhuti Mataji, and he's replying. Having heard about Sankhya in chapters 26 and 27 and yoga in chapter 28, Devahuti inquires about bhakti. So she's already asked about Sankhya, and he's given, Kapil Dev is given a lot of information. Now she's asking specifically about bhakti. And Kapil Dev is replying that it can be in three modes of material nature. What are those three modes? Ignorance. And that sort of
In
bhakti.
mode of goodness, in mode of passion, in mode of ignorance.
So ignorance, when bhakti is performed in ignorance, then there's envy involved, there's pride, anger, even violence, and there's no compassion. That bhakti is very, very not going to help. It's not going to really take one towards God, right? And unless God is there personally to purify the devotee, and the example is Kamsa, or Hiranyakashipu, or Hiranyaksha, their devotional service was in the mode of ignorance because it was full of pride, envy, arrogance. But the Lord was physically present, was there to deal with that, purify them, and throw them into the spiritual world. Passion, there's a desire for material enjoyment, fame, wealth. I am doing bhakti to become a famous yogi, and I will get many disciples, we'll get a lot of money. Is a bit of a saying that if you want to become wealthy, especially in Bharat, the sort of businessmen, they earn quite a lot of money through bribes. The government officials, they earn a lot. But it said actually, if you want to really become wealthy, you become a god man, then you can really make a lot of money. So this is what people try to do, go into bhakti to perhaps make some profit out of it. And there's desires for objects or disciples and not the Lord. This is a big disadvantage. When bhakti is done in the mode of goodness, there's a desire to become free from karma. And the person will engage in offering everything to the Lord. What they eat, what they earn, everything is offered. And they have desires for coming out of this world, liberation. Then in the next 10 verses, he explains that devotion which is beyond the three modes of material nature. So, of course, ignorance is not good. Passion is also not favorable. Goodness is good, but there's still a desire there for something. I'm worshipping you, Lord. I want something in return. Of course, that something in return is not a bad thing. I want to get out of this world and come back to you. But you're still wanting something. Pure devotional service, he's defining. Some of the qualities of a devotee already mentioned in chapter 25 are mentioned here as well. So when we did chapter 25, devotees will remember we went through a list of the qualities of a bhakta, pure devotee. Devotees practicing pure devotional service are transcendental to the modes. They are naturally attracted to hear about Krishna and disinterested in liberation. So they're disinterested in liberation. So here, more to goodness, there's a desire for liberation, but contrast that with the pure bhakta. No desire for liberation. In fact, they do not even accept spiritual benedictions. What to speak of material things? Dutifully performing the activities of bhakti, they treat everyone respectfully and kindly. A devotee who constantly engages in devotional service can catch the Lord, just as fragrant air catches the sense of smell. Deity worship to avoid obstacles in devotional service. This is quite interesting. One should worship the Lord's deity until one realizes his presence in one's own heart and that of others. Deity worship performed by those who disrespect or hate other living entities, not seeing the Lord in their hearts, is not pleasing to the Lord. So the whole idea of deity worship is to progress to the point where we see the Lord not just in our hearts, but in others as well. And when we do that, what happens? We equally respect everyone. To please the Lord in everyone's heart, one should behave properly and respect all living entities. One thing I just actually wanted to go back. I don't know why I didn't put that in. I didn't put it in because it was here. When we were talking about the pure devotee not wanting liberation, let alone material things, he doesn't even want all these types of liberations. These liberations are to live with the Lord, to have the same form as the Lord, like that. So the pure devotee doesn't even hanker for that. He's simply happy in his service. And that is a very, very powerful devotee, because that devotee can conquer the heart of the Lord. And once the heart of the Lord is conquered, then effectively one becomes one becomes, I wouldn't like to use these words, but can't think of anything better at this moment, more powerful than the Lord. Of course, the bhakta doesn't even want that, of course, because he simply wants to serve. But the Lord will do anything that the devotee wants, anything. He'll be putty in the hands, like he is of Srimati Radharani and Mother Yashoda. So to please the Lord in everyone's heart, one should behave properly and respect all living entities as equal. In the form of death, the Lord gives fear to those who see differences between themselves and other living beings. Proper behavior can be achieved by charity, respect, friendly behavior, equal vision. But having equal vision at the same time does not mean that the devotee loses discrimination based on gradations in the jivas. One should understand the various grades of bodies, from basic organisms through the animals up to human beings. Amongst the many grades of humans, the Lord's pure devotee is the best. So yes, we treat everybody equally in the sense of the living entity, the soul. But what type of body they have, for example, if one has a cow's body compared to a tiger's body, you treat them differently. You would go up to the cow and you must maybe stroke the cow, be friendly, but you wouldn't do that with a tiger. You'd use your sense of discrimination on the basis of the gradation of the jiva. But having understood that the soul that's in the cow is exactly the same soul that's in the tiger, that is exactly the same soul in the pure devotee. So in that way, one is equal. But how we deal with different people or different living entities, different types of who have different types of bodies, that is, we have to use our discrimination. But the criteria is one should behave properly and respect all living entities as equal. So just because somebody has got a disability, if you like, it doesn't mean one can treat them harshly. You still have to treat them like you would treat anybody else. Okay. Then Kapil Dev talks about the Lord as time. Maitreya already explained the characteristics of time in the 10th chapter. Maybe devotees will recall, although we did it last week sometime. Kapil Dev now further expands because he's replying to Devahuti's question in the text 4 in this chapter about the nature of time. So he's explaining it causes transformation. It's another feature of the Lord. Those who don't know about time, respect time, they're afraid because time will catch up. Time enters everyone's heart, shelter of everyone, master of all masters, can't control time. It controls us, causes everyone to die, holds no one dear, inspires those who haven't forgotten time. So those who understand that we're in this world for a short period of time and live according to that basis, time inspires them to become more serious about bhakti. Destroys who have forgotten time. So those who have forgotten time, it's a little bit like the frog who croaks, croaking away, and the snake of time comes and swallows that frog up. So if we are croaking, if we're just talking non-Krishna conscious things, then the snake of time will come and finish us. The demigods are scared of time. That's why they do their duties. The trees produce fruit in the proper seasons. Rivers and oceans do not overflow. The sky provides space for all planets. This is the nature of time. He's explaining how time controls all of these things. It's unchanging, it's without beginning, but it causes birth. This is incredible analogy, or contradiction rather. Without end, but causes everybody's end. Dissolves the universe and even dissolves Yamraj, the Lord of Death himself. So time is very powerful. Any questions on chapter 29? Very interesting chapter. I hope devotees have read it. Everybody satisfied?
Prabhuji, who is Maitreya Rishi?
Sorry?
Who is Maitreya Rishi?
Oh, Maitreya. Maitreya is a great sage, great devotee of God. Yeah, he's a great devotee of Lord Krishna. He was there right at the end when Krishna left this world. Okay, let's go into chapter 30. Greshu kuta dharmeshu dukha tantreshva tandrita kurvan dukha partikaram shukhavan manyate grihi. This is
Translation.
Yep.
Attached householder remains in his family life, which is full of diplomacy and politics, always spreading miseries and controlled by acts of sense gratification. He acts just to counteract the reactions of all his miseries, and if he can successfully counteract such miseries, he thinks that he is happy.
This is talking about householder life, our situation. And Kapil Dev gives a lot of detail, and he doesn't mince his words either. This is chapter is called Description by Lord Kapil of Adverse Fruitive Activities. So far, Kapil Dev has explained bhakti mixed with the modes. That's what we just did in chapter 29. And pure bhakti. Talked about Gyan and Astanga in 26, 27, 28. Now he answers Devhuti's questions about the movements of the jiva. And the question was asked in the third text. So he's talking about the miseries of the living entity in this material world. They're anxious, attached, householders, thinking themselves happy, supporting their families at any cost, not knowing that everything will inevitably be destroyed by time. So this is a fundamental problem that whole of humanity faces. We're working our guts out of, and not understanding that at any moment life can end, but we are almost pretending that I will never die, we will never die, we'll be here forever. But time will come and snatch away our life. And if we haven't addressed that matter, then we'll be stuck in this position, this samsara forever, thinking themselves happy. They remain in family life. Even when somebody is really, really old, about to die, they're not thinking about what will my next life be, but instead they're just somehow living their lives with no purpose. They enjoy only a fraction of their earnings, illegally earned, which inevitably purchases them a ticket to hell. This is pretty heavy stuff. Finally, unable to support the family, the householder becomes diseased, invalid, is kept like a pet dog, he's disrespected at home because he's no longer bringing the money in. But still, he does not become averse to family life. Finally, he dies in grief and great pain, seeing his relatives crying. So what happens to him after death? He's terrified. He's arrested by the servants of death. Due to the living entity's sins, he is bitten by dogs, dragged along a long road under a scorching sun, walking on hot sand with fires on both sides. Afflicted by hunger and thirst, he is whipped and punished in various ways by the Yamadutas. This is if one has been sinful. And this whole thing is talking about somebody who's been sinful. After leaving hell and passing through the lowest forms of animal bodies, he's again born as a human being on this earth. So hell is not a place where one lives forever. If one has committed sinful activities, one may have to suffer in these hells. Once the suffering is over, one comes back again onto earth, but in the lower species of life, and then slowly, gradually goes up the chain. So take chapter 31. Tesva santeshu mudeshu kanditatma swa shadusu sangam na kurva choye chesu yosit kridamageshu cha.
Translation: one should not associate with a curious fool who is bereft of the knowledge of self-realization and who is no more than a dancing dog in the hands of a woman.
So this chapter, we're going to see a lot of that. Lord Kapil's instructions on the movements of the living entity. He's talking about life in the womb so this living entity, he's gone through hell, he's gone through animal life, plant life, whatever it is, and now he's attained human birth. Under the Lord's supervision, according to his karma, the jiva is made to enter into a woman's womb through the semen. The development of the embryo is described by Kapil Dev. Here it is. So in chapter 31, he explains what happens And actually, there's a lot more detailed explanation than this, but this is just a quick summary. First night, the sperm and the ovum mix, and then the fifth night, the mixture ferments into a bubble. 10th day, develops into a form like a plum, and then as a lump of flesh or an egg. First month, the head develops. Second month, hands, feet, limbs develop. Third month, the nails, fingers, toes, etc., all develop. The fourth month, the dhatus develop. So that gives a circulation, the bone marrow, etc. Fifth month, he starts to get hungry and develop and thirst. Fifth month, sixth month, he moves to the right side of the abdomen. Seventh month, he develops consciousness. So in this way, this embryo is described, how he's growing. So the soul is in there from the very beginning, but the consciousness takes a little time to develop because it's completely covered. It's like the consciousness of grass is very limited. So the consciousness of the embryo is very limited until it starts growing. And then the becomes more and more alert. There's a lot more detail than this. And if anybody's interested, we can go through that at some point. Trapped in the mother's womb, the living entity suffers terribly. He's bitten by worms and burned by his mother's secretions. His body is bent like a bow. From the seventh month, the child attains consciousness, and frightened, he prays to the Lord, appealing for relief from his condition. The acharyas say that actually only a devotee child prays like this. The rest are still not very conscious of their situation. These prayers are from a devotee, not a non-devotee. Fallen, and the prayers are like this. I have fallen into a pool of stool, urine, and blood. I'm scorched by my mother's gastric fire. The soul prays anxiously for his release. Please release me. And he's also promising the Lord at that time that I will never forget you. In this life, I will achieve my perfection. I promise you that. I will always remember you. Just let me out of here. However, some souls, understanding that the world outside the womb is controlled by Maya Devi, they resolve to remain in that uncomfortable condition. They don't want to come out. A bit like Sukadeva Goswami didn't want to come out, but he was powerful. We don't have that power. Unfortunately, the air causing childbirth pushes him out of the womb, forced out. And that is a very traumatic time. Losing his memory because of the agony of birth, he is cared for by his relatives. And actually he forgets the promises that he's made in the womb to the Lord. He forgets because of this agony of coming out. So he's cared for by his parents. Yes.
So even the one who is praying, he's a devotee. He also forgets. As soon as everybody forgets. Then everybody are the same at that stage.
Pretty much everybody's the same, except those who are at a very high level of consciousness, like Sukadev Goswami, like Prabhupada. Prabhupada said he's never forgotten Krishna even for a moment in his whole life.
Really?
Yeah. So they're of course the eternally liberated souls. But in our case, unfortunately, we forget because that birth is quite a traumatic time.
Yeah. Okay.
Unable to move or defend himself, the baby is repeatedly bitten by insects and cries bitterly. In childhood, he suffers frustration because he desires things which he cannot achieve or get. He desires things which he can't get. The latest PlayStation or sweets and chocolates, etc. So then, how does this false ego grow? What happens to us? We start growing, we get bad association, the influence of lust. The living entity, after growing up again, becomes bewildered by accepting the impermanent to be permanent and only thinking in terms of I and my. This is the biggest problem we face in this world. We think we're going to live here forever. And also we're thinking, this belongs to me, this is ours, this is mine. Becomes bewildered and angry against similarly lusty people by identifying with the body and performing sinful activities. Again, the cycle continues. Return to hell as before. So this cycle is a horrible cycle that we're in. We have to break the cycle. A little bit like when your luggage comes out onto the conveyor belt at the airport, it just stays in that conveyor belt until somebody picks it up. We're in that conveyor belt of life, samsara, and sometimes we are in advantageous situations, sometimes we're disadvantaged situations, sometimes we're rich, sometimes we're poor, sometimes we're in heaven, sometimes we're in hell. So we're going up and down this ladder, this samsara, and there's no break to it unless somebody picks us out. And that somebody is the guru. When the guru comes, finds us, takes us out, that's what's required, Guru and Krishna. And what is the attachment? A man, even great devotees and jnanis, should avoid women, and vice versa. It works both ways. He talks mainly about men, but then later on he also talks about women. Then those attached to women. Infatuation to any other object is not as complete as it is that results from the attachment to women. So attachment to women is so complete that infatuation is hard to get away from. By simply moving their eyebrows, women can control even powerful men. Amongst those who do not worship Narayan, no one is spared by Maya. No one is spared unless one worships Narayan, Krishna. Similarly for a woman, so all of this, what we've said, applies vice versa as well. Similarly for a woman, the so-called protection of her husband and family are arrangements for her death. Because what happens? Attachment. Attachment will just keep one in this world. Can't escape. Then, the living entity takes birth in various species, on various planets, and dies when his karma in that body comes to an end. The fear of death is conquered when one sees one's true spiritual nature and engages in devotional service, bhakti yoga. Understanding one's real nature, one can, even in this world, be free from attachment. So it is possible, but it needs a great deal of seriousness. As the living entity is eternal, the body is simply a temporary covering. There is no real birth and death for the soul. And thus, one should not be horrified, miserable, or eager to enjoy in this world. I think that's it. So this is the end of chapter 31. These are pretty eye-opening chapters, these 3 chapters. After he's given a lot of philosophy on Sankhya and Astanga, now he's given us quite a bit on bhakti and how to do bhakti properly. But he's also described the movements of the living entity in this world, up and down, heaven, hell, earth. We have to break away from this cycle through becoming detached, through bhakti yoga. Okay. So, any questions, please, or any comments?
Yes, Prabhuji.
Yeah.
Yes, it's quite a sort of a thinking and why we do all this all the time in spite of all this suffering, especially it starts right from the womb itself.
Yeah.
And yeah, it is. But this
It's
is the thing
Maya.
we don't remember, isn't it? There was
Maya.
one thing which I read that as soon as you come out, you are born, you forget everything, is it? And it
Yeah.
says here that because of the pain, but also because of the Maya,
Yes.
who
Absolutely.
attacks as soon as one is born, isn't it?
Absolutely. As
That's
soon as one is born, oh, what a cute baby. Oh, isn't he beautiful? That bodily consciousness is immediate from the parents, from everybody. And it's constant, and there's no instruction, no guidance in this world
hmm,
that you are not this body. There's no guidance.
nobody tells that.
No.
Nobody. We have got a 10-month-old baby, and nobody talks about the guidance soul that you are not this body. Yeah, it is. It is frightening, actually.
Yeah. In the old days, of course, this knowledge was there because of Gurukul. The
Yes.
children were taught, the spiritual principles first and foremost, as well as all the other worldly subjects. But the first thing that is discussed is the spiritual aspect.
Yeah,
And
and the second question was, once you have been to the hell, what it describes to people who are done sinful activities, and so when they take the next birth, how is that decided? Is it decided by this tree, by the subtle body which
no,
they carry? No.
no, it's decided they go through the lowest form of life,
So
the
they
amoeba.
okay.
It starts from the amoeba. So if you're in hell, you go through the evolution process, through the animal kingdom, through the plant life, animal kingdom. If you're in heaven and you're coming this direction down, then you will be born in a very powerful family. You will be a very powerful soul already. So you would get, you would have prestige and fame and everything like that. But because of the illusion, the Maya, pride will develop, and then you're on a downward trend into hell.
Yeah. Okay. But those who are not sinful activities, those who are like a normal people who have died but not been to the heaven, they start once they fall down, they also start from somewhere, isn't it? Or
Oh,
up.
that would be determined, as you said, consciousness, karma,
Yes.
and desires.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
if you had, say, somebody doesn't commit any sinful activity, but they're very attached to this world, their family, but because they haven't committed any sin, they won't go to hell. Because they haven't committed any or done any greatly pious activities, they won't go to heaven. So their position is likely to be as if they're a male, they're likely to be a female in the next life.
Mm.
If they're rich, because they probably were a little arrogant, that money will have perhaps tainted their attitude, and they were perhaps a little insulting to those who didn't have money. So they would become poor.
Yes.
And vice versa. Those who are poor, they would be praying to the Lord, my dear Lord, I don't have any money, please give me money. And so in the next life, the Lord will fulfill that desire. They'll become rich.
Yeah. If you want more money, he will fulfill his
Desire. Generally, what happens is a man will think of his wife at the end and become a woman, and vice versa. A woman will think of the husband at the end and become a man. That's generally how the scriptures explain what happens.
Yeah. Okay.
Thank
Hare
you.
Krishna Babuji.
Hare Krishna, Mataji.
So, like people who has taken to this Krishna consciousness path, so do they, if they have committed sins, do they also go to hell?
If it's there is some suffering for sure, but there's 2 points of view. The living entity when he's suffering, he'll be thinking, if he's a devotee, he'll be thinking, this suffering is nothing. Krishna has reduced my suffering to nothing. It should be, I should suffer a lot more. And Krishna, the way he'll look at it, this is the other point of view, from his point of view, my devotee, oh, you've committed some sins. I don't want to punish you, but I'm not going to interfere with the laws of material nature, but I will be there. I am your protector. Don't worry. I will hold your hand. So those 2 points coincide very nicely. So the devotee doesn't feel any pain.
It's like, I think when we were looking at the Shraddh and what to do on that day in the, when someone dies and going up to Yamraj. So the devotees, because they'd done all these pious things during their life, the sailing up to the abode of Yamraj was smoother, whereas the people who hadn't done all these pious activities they were punished a lot more by the Yamdutas on the way to Yamraj.
Indulekha Mataji,
Prabhuji, Ajamila.
yeah.
Yes.
What about him, Riyansh? Tell me.
Prabhuji, at last, when he called the name of Narayan, and Yama Dutas are dragging him, then Vishnu Dutas are also dragging him.
But what happened? You're absolutely right. Good boy. Very good boy. But what happened was, Ajamil saw this conversation between the Yamadut and the Vishnu Duts. And
And he was shocked when he saw Vishnu Duta.
yes, but what happened was he realized he's really made some terrible mistakes in his life. He
At last, Prabhuji, at last.
Just wait. He had another 12 years to rectify his mistakes. You see what I'm saying? He didn't get the Vishnu Dutas, Vishnu Dutas didn't come for him to the spiritual world for 12 years. So he had 12 years to rectify his mistakes. Does that make sense, Riyansh?
Yes, Prabhuji.
So it wasn't that he just said Narayan and suddenly he was in the spiritual world. No, doesn't work that way. One still has to become, one's consciousness still has to become purified. And he was given that opportunity. And that is called the second chance. And there's a book all about that written by Prabhupada. So we've also got this second chance now. We've got this opportunity to completely transform our consciousness. And we're very fortunate. Indulekha Maji, however,
Yes,
you have no problem. You have no problem. You are
that is my
back.
point. Okay, no, Prabhuji, that is my point, because if anyone who takes the holy names, who chant the holy name, all their sins are eradicated, right? So how come then even some devotees have to go down to hell?
What happens is this: the clock stops ticking, but Prabhupada explained the pendulum is still moving.
Yes.
It takes a little time before that completely stops.
Yes.
So
Okay.
that's the thing. And devotee suffering, actually, we can't necessarily understand it. Like Prabhupada, for the last, 6 months, he didn't eat anything.
Yes.
Drink a little bit. His body became very frail. And if you look at him, he was like a skeleton. You know, it's actually tears come to the eyes when you see what's happening there. So was he suffering? Would Krishna make Prabhupada suffer? No, not a chance. Why would he make Prabhupada suffer? But devotees go through that, one for their own purification, but secondly, for set as an example, how one behaves.
Yes, I was thinking about that. But even our acharyas, they set examples in different ways. So maybe that's why Krishna allowed Prabhupada to go through the so-called suffering, just to give us an idea of, if we don't take the path seriously, what will happen, right?
Yeah, and also if you saw Prabhupada, There's one tape, one video where Jay Advaita Swami is holding her microphone.
Yes.
And he's in bed, he's translating. Very close towards the end of his life.
Yes. Even he couldn't pronounce properly. He was breathing heavily, but still he was talking. He was
He's
taking his time.
translating, yeah. He's still doing his purports.
Yes. Yes.
So that's an
Ripple,
example.
Nabi?
Yes.
Yeah, and in this regard, also when we say that, our sinful reactions, yeah, you see quite right that, the clock stops ticking, and it's a bit like unplugging a fan, which is which has been running, and you switch it off, but the momentum of the fan still goes on for a while till it kind of, loses momentum. But then karma is like that, it's been like one disciple of a guru was walking along with him, and then he suddenly got a thorn in his foot, and he said, I'm walking along with you, and how come I get suffering of a thorn in my foot? And the guru said, well, you're situated in a good position, you're serving me, but you don't realize that, you were going to have a really bad accident. Your leg was going to be
Exactly.
Your leg was going to be gone all, so you don't know what suffering was out there for you. But then when the spiritual master takes on, and he does switch off your karma in some ways up to that point, but then he takes on some of the burden of the karma. So Prabhupada always said, he said that, I'm suffering because, my disciples, have taken on a lot of, it's not easy to take on the disciples and their karma and guide them and all that. So there is some reaction, for Guru Maharaj and Prabhupada and all that. So disciples have to be a little bit careful as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Thank you for that. Yeah, nice one.
But yes, but devotees, I think the devotees do suffer because Charus, remember, like our Bhakti Charu Swami, yes, and our Shruti Maharaj who was here. They are suffering. But I think this is what people think, that good people suffer, bad people, everybody suffers because of their past karmas catching up.
But we don't know, because at the end of the day, the relationship between the devotee and Krishna is sacred, right? So,
yes.
Like Bhakti Charu Swami, yeah, he got the COVID, but actually, we don't know what was happening while he was in the hospital and in that actual situation. And if you look at Shruti, we saw him towards the end of his time, and actually, he wasn't suffering. He was actually, he was, of course, the body was going through pain.
Body was suffering. Yeah, he had so many operations and this and that.
Yeah, but mentality was, his consciousness was clear,
Of course, mentality is.
Yeah.
But when we think that everybody's suffering, like previous Mataji's questions, I'm saying that yes, everybody's bodies suffer when in this material world.
Yeah.
To a certain extent, but then devotees, they cope in a better way than the non-devotees or people who have no faith.
Very good point. That's absolutely right. It's the way they handle that suffering.
Yes, please.
Very good, very good. Anil, you wanted to ask a question?
Yes, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Just few minutes back, you were saying that a person, like a man, takes the form of a wife, and the wife takes the form of the husband. So going into little bit details like of this one, what happens to people who are single, who are bachelor, people who have gone through different phases of life, and people like who have been very religious and spiritual, but during the end of the life they are suffering because of their health or body or something like that, and they are unable to focus on Lord Krishna. So like what happens during that point of time?
Very good points. So those who are single, unmarried perhaps, it would depend on their attachments. So for example, a wife and a husband is easy, right? Because the wife is very attached to the husband and vice versa. So at the end, they'll be thinking, oh, if I die, what will happen to my husband, and I haven't made a will. So because of that, they're thinking at the end, I am going to, as of a husband, of a man, they'll become a man. With a single person, if say, like Ajamil was at the end abandoned by his whole family, right? So he started thinking about his little son, whose name was Narayan. You know the pastime, right? So that's what would happen. Whoever, when you're dying, you would think about those who you are closest to. So it may be even a pet. If you have a dog, a pet, the problem with that is in the next life will be in a dog's body. That's the problem. So that's why there's a tradition of giving God's name to children. So when you call out for your children, at least it's Krishna Prem or Ananta Shesh or something like that. You're actually taking God's name. There's a very funny pastime that one Gopal Patel, he was on his deathbed and he called out, where's Krishna? I'm here. Where's Rama? I'm here. So who's looking after the shop? So in terms of your other question, if somebody is religious, but at the end of their life, they cannot remember Krishna because of ill health. Well, if they've been religious their life, to be honest, a devotee doesn't care. One who is a devotee, who's serving the Lord all his life, whether he remembers God at the end or not, does not matter, because he's always under the protection of God. He's
Krishna
given,
will never abandon him.
Krishna will never abandon him. He's given everything. Just because at the end he fails to remember God, which we don't know, because we're not going to be able to be in a situation where that's ever going to be identified.
Krishna says he preserves.
But yeah, Krishna has promised that he'll preserve what we have and give us what we lack. So if we lack, like many devotees, there was one devotee called Tribhuvanath in the UK. He was an extraordinary devotee, one of Prabhupada's disciples, but so much energy. At the end, he died in Brazil from cancer. But there's absolutely no doubt in my mind that he will have attained, he is definitely in the right direction for the spiritual world because of his commitment throughout his life. Just because he didn't die in Vrindavan doesn't matter. Just because he died in a hospital doesn't matter. He'll always be looked after. God will never abandon that person. I rather have, as one in the Bhagavatam it says, one moment of consciousness, Krishna consciousness, than a whole lifetime of sense enjoyment. One moment of Krishna consciousness even is better than a whole lifetime of nonsense. So you can see the value of having some sort of Krishna consciousness in one's life. Does that make sense?
That's a very good point, Nabi, and it's very important that we keep endeavoring on this path, knowing Krishna and deal with our karma. At the end of the day, so many living entities, and we are not the judge and the jury, and we're not there to condemn anyone either. It's not our position. And it's how devotees go. Ultimately then it's in the hands of Krishna and devotee, but it's definitely that element of surrender is very important, and depending on Krishna is very important. So we're not the judge and jury, and how personally I'm not in my position to say, oh, this person died in this way, so he's definitely gone to hell. It's not my position. I hope he's not, unless he's committed crime and all that, then he suffering is there, yeah. But certainly, someone like Prabhupada, and they were elevated souls, and we take their guidance, and they, you know, that is why Krishna loves his devotees like Prabhupada, because they are the ones who go out there and take the risk of taking disciples and guide them and deal with somebody's karma. Nobody else is ever going to come forward and do that.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
Thank you. Anything else? Okay, so we can. Should we do the Nashinga Kavach first or the Damodar Arati? Thank you for questions and participation, contributions. It's really, really good interactions. Madhusudan Prabhu, Anil, Indulekha Mataji, and
No
Nani.
lessons today?
Yeah, we're doing it. Oh, good point. Thank you. Well done. Keep going. Yeah. Thank you for reminding me.
Okay.
Very good.
Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavati Vasudevaya. So lessons from Canto Free. Chapter 1, if we make our home a temple, the Lord will definitely visit us. Chapter 2, in this age of Kali, our only tapasya is to chant the holy name of the Lord. Chapter 3, we all need a guru to guide us on the spiritual path. Chapter 4, no matter how learned one may be, one should not try to instruct someone who is well versed in spiritual knowledge and who is older than them unless solicited. Chapter 5, the Lord's external energy is Maya, and through her, the entire material world is created. Chapter 6, we should always engage in discussion of the activities and glories of the Lord, which are nicely written by the sages for our benefits. Chapter 7, by serving the spiritual master, one develops transcendental ecstasy in the service of the Lord, who vanquishes one's material distress. Chapter 8, the Supreme Personality of Godhead spoke the Srimad Bhagavatam to the great sages for the benefit of those entangled in the material miseries. Chapter 9, if we want to escape the anxiety of the material world, we need to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Lord. Chapter 10, all living entities are struggling with the forces of material nature, but by transcendental knowledge and realization, and by surrendering unto the Lord, we can control this material energy. Chapter 11, the Lord controls all the physical movement by his time potency, yet he is not visible in the physical world. Chapter 12, we should always try to control our anger, because one escalates, anger turns into wrath. Chapter 13, we should live our life in pursuance of the principles of devotional service and worship. Please read that bit for me. And worship the Lord, is it?
The worship of the Lord by performance of yajna.
Yajna, thank you. Chapter 14, as a good combination for spiritual advancement is needed in the human society, the boys should be trained as brahmacharis and girls in the virtue of chastity. Chapter 15, only in the human form of life one can attain perfect religious knowledge. Even the demigods desire to have such life. Chapter 16, the water of the Ganges sanctifies the three worlds because it has washed the lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Chapter 17, for peace to prevail in society, we need to follow regulations in life. Otherwise, we will have to undergo the stringent reactions of nature's law. Chapter 18, no one can surpass the potencies of the Lord, and no one should deride the transcendental form of the Lord as material. Chapter 19, we should always abide to rules and regulation in every aspect of life and respect our opponents. Chapter 20, as soon as one forgets one primary duty, which is to render devotional service unto the Lord, one creates atmosphere of sense enjoyment. Chapter 21, the Lord knows what his devotee needs, and without asking, he made arrangement to fulfill those needs. Chapter 22, the perfection of spiritual life can be achieved by touching the dust of the lotus feet of a holy man and by associating with him. Chapter 23, half of the benefit acquired by a pious man goes to his chaste wife who support him throughout their lives. Chapter 24, according to the Vedic scriptures, a son should obey the commands of his father and spiritual master with reverence. Chapter 25, following the path of sadhus who are tolerant, merciful, peaceful, and friendly. Can you read, please? 25 at the end.
And peaceful and friendly will help us progress in spiritual life.
Thank you. And 26, spiritual knowledge leads us to attain the ultimate perfection of life, which can free us, I think, from the entanglement or something.
Material entanglement.
Yes, thank you.
That's it, is it? Hang on. I thought there was more.
It should be.
Hang on. 27. There should be another cup. Oh, what happened to it?
You haven't copied them.
No, I did. Oh.
You want to read them out if you have them
Yes.
Yes,
Yes,
please.
I have. Give me 1 second, please. Let me just.
No problem. No problem. Yeah, maybe I didn't save it. Weird.
So I just read 26, right?
Yes,
Yes,
yes.
yes.
So 27, 28, 29.
Okay, 27. To keep the mind and consciousness under full control, one must very seriously perform devotional service with detachment. 28. The Lord is eternally very beautiful and he is worshipped by all inhabitants of every planet. I think I stopped here because today
That's
we
it,
did
that's it.
29,
That's right. Very good. Thank you so much. Very good.
Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Hi. So, Madhusun Babu?
Haribol.
Hare Krishna.
Let me. Okay, I'll go to my notes and just send them to you, isn't it? So.
Oh, is that, they're on here now. Your one is here.
Sorry?
I think your ones are here.
They're on the screen.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. So these are instructions 29. According to this verse, 3:29:34, which is what you'll have covered, such a perfect devotee offers respect to every living entity because he's under the firm conviction that the Supreme Personality of God has entered the body of every living entity as the supersoul or controller. Our devotional service can be just imitation or in the mode of ignorance, passion, or just goodness. So we are instructed to be respectful to all living entities because, well, Krishna says, he's in every living entity. So this Kapil Dev is explaining how, and I think you covered quite well as well in the lessons, that devotional service can be in the mode of ignorance, passion, or goodness, but we have to try and transcend that. And just doing some sort of, like, example is just a priest doing some deity worship, but he doesn't respect it. And the mention the name of be a separatist, nothing is separate from the Supreme Lord, so when we have to try and understand how we're progressing in spiritual life and being respectful to all living entities all the way, say a Vaishnava will respect demigod, even an ant, so that's one thing to bear in mind. Chapter 30, one should work honestly according to his qualifications. He should not earn his livelihood unfairly by means for which he is not qualified. So you got to be qualified and doing your duty and then earn your livelihood that way. It is especially mentioned that the means of livelihood for those who are trying to advance in Krishna consciousness must be very fair and uncomplicated. So it's like Prabhupada's always said, simple living and high thinking is a good philosophy, that we follow. Here it is mentioned that he who earns his livelihood by unfair means, kevalena, is sent to the darkest hellish regions. Otherwise, if one maintains his family by prescribed methods and honest means, there is no objection to one's being a family man. So you can be a family man, you can be whatever, but as long as you're doing your duties, according to the Varnashram system. Also, Varnashram system is explained a bit more in detail. I mean, Kali Yuga is very difficult, to maintain the Varnashram dharma and system. So it's recommended that, whatever position we are in, doesn't matter what, at least start chanting and fix our mind on Krishna. 31, when the living entity is engaged in the material body, he is called a Jiva Bhuta. And when he is free from the material body, is called a Brahma Bhuta. So that we mentioned that in the third stage of liberation, where it's the Brahma Bhuta, Prasanatma, as you say. So Lord Chaitanya says that the living entities bound up by fruitive activities are wandering in this way throughout the whole universe. And if by some chance or by pious activities, they get in touch with a bona fide spiritual master by the grace of Krishna, then they get the seed of devotional service. After getting this seed, if one sows it within his heart and pours water on it by hearing and chanting, the seed grows into a big plant, and there are fruits and flowers which the living entity can enjoy even in this material world. That is called the Brahma Bhuta stage. In his designated conditional living entity is called a materialistic, but upon being freed from all designations, when he is fully Krishna conscious, engaged in devotional service, then he is called a liberated. So the difference between liberated and being materialistic. So it's covered in so many different ways, and all these instructions in this chapter, so unless one gets the opportunity to associate with the bona fide spiritual master by the grace of the Lord, there is no possibility of one's liberation from the cycle of birth and death in the different species of life and through the different grades of planets. So I think you've covered this very nicely in your lessons, in your presentation as well, and in our discussion. So I hope that helps. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, great. Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai.
Jai Prabhupada ki jai.